Hi, everybody. This is Chris.
And Kathy.
We wanted to take a minute to thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate every listener and are grateful for this platform.
Please help us share our vision by subscribing to our show through your favorite streaming app. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at PetAbility Podcast.
Check out our ever-growing list of affiliates and sponsors. Simply go to the show notes for information and links. Proceeds from purchases help to support our show. Thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to PetAbility. I'm your host, Kathy Simon, certified veterinary technician and certified canine rehabilitation practitioner.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston, licensed physical therapist and small animal physical rehabilitationist.
Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives.
Good day, Kathy.
Good day, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm fine. What's up with you?
I'm having a really good day because I don't want to give it away just yet because we have some things to talk about. But the guest that we have today, I would be lying if I said I wasn't fangirling like a little bit.
Or would you be lionsing?
People will get that joke as we go on. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a teaser, ladies and gentlemen. That's a teaser.
Before we talk about our guest and bring our guest on, I wanted to talk to you about something I saw in the news that I think we should talk about.
Yeah, remarkable.
I know. There was a dog, I think it was in Portugal. Am I right?
Mm-hmm,
it was in Portugal.
Right.
Dog's name is Bobbie, and that dog lived to be 31 years old, which at first I have to say, that can't be true. Like, it can't be. But yeah, it was confirmed. It was confirmed through records, and Guinness confirmed that this was the oldest living dog and lived to be 31 years old. And if you look at his lineage, there's been longevity in his line.
Mm-hmm.
But that was amazing. Can you imagine having your dog for 31 years?
I know. Truly amazing. And it didn't sound like he had many health problems as he went through his life.
I mean, certainly genetics is a factor here, but what was that dog's lifestyle like? You know, he must have been active, right? He must have been active, and that's going to play into what we're going to talk about today, actually. Right. But boy, the genetics and whatever activity he was doing just, was a lottery winner. For
one thing I was absolutely shocked about was they said in this particular article that he ate everything his people ate. I'm not sure he ever had dog food.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just by, yeah, I know. But to your point, like being active and so forth, because it did sound like they were, out in the country and the dogs of old, right? Yeah. I remember growing up on the farms in Iowa, and there are these, dogs that just tended to thrive, running from farm to farm.
Right.
So Bobbie, rest in peace. Your story is inspiring. And speaking of Bobbie, we have another renowned Bobbie on our show today, right, Kathy?
We have the renowned Bobbie Lyons from the Bobbie Lyons Canine Campus and the lead instructor and program director of the Canine Strength and Conditioning Program at North Carolina State University. So it's really exciting to have Bobbie here today with us. And when I saw that Bobbie was the lead instructor for this certification program, I signed up right away. I just wanted to take a class from Bobbie. And of course, that was one reason I wanted to take this coursework. But the other reason is that despite being a canine rehabilitation practitioner for 20 years now, in fact, this year, 2023 has been 20 years, I realized that this is an area where I need improvement. I could be doing so much better working with strengthening and conditioning of healthy dogs. As a veterinary technician, I have the unique opportunity to follow a dog through their entire lifespan, from puppyhood to adulthood and into their senior years. So I have the ability to impact many dogs early on in their lives. Ultimately, that will benefit them as they age. And Chris, that you and I mentioned the importance of movement almost on every show, right? We always talk about the importance of movement on just about every episode. And there are so many simple movements that we can turn into exercises and add them into a dog's, routine. As small animal rehabbers, this is something we tell our clients all the time. Don't be intimidated. We can turn anything into an exercise. Even standing, simply standing can be an exercise. And what we know from canine fitness is that it impacts a dog's overall health and well-being and quality of life. And that movement benefits the body, benefits the circulatory system and metabolism and joint health and emotional health. But also imagine this. Imagine the impact it would make on a dog who maybe tears their CCL, and what that dog's recovery would look like if that dog was already conditioned, if that dog already had good strength and good core strength, what that dog's recovery would look like. This dog would be going into surgery in the best possible condition, and that's going to aid in that dog's recovery. So I'm so happy to see that North Carolina State offers this certification program in strengthening and conditioning. And this is just going to make us better, more rounded practitioners, trainers, and handlers. As you know, I have a pug who's a boy genius. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. He's a genius. And he's also a nose work dog. And he's very good at that. And what I'm seeing in myself is that it's really helping me be a better handler. And it's really helping us with our teamwork. And that's been a very good bonding opportunity, for both of us. So I'm really interested to hear what Bobbie has to say about how we can turn simple movement into exercises. And what does that look like? And who does that benefit? But Chris, let me just give you a little background on Bobbie before we get started and introduce her to the show. Bobbie Lyons owns and operates the Bobbie Lyons Canine Campus, as well as Positive Performance. She offers dog training, fitness training, trick training around the globe. Bobbie is also, again, like I said, the lead instructor and program director of the Certified Canine Strength and Conditioning Coach program offered through NC State and North Carolina University of Veterinary Medicine. She was also part of the team that contributed knowledge and experience to the Certified Canine Fitness Training Lab, and was the course instructor for the program. Bobbie completed the certification program for the canine fitness through the Companion Animal Science Institute, and she is a certified training partner with Karen Pryor Academy. Over the years, Bobbie has not only established herself as a seasoned professional, but also a mentor, guiding countless dogs and their owners in building a harmonious relationship with their pets. Her compassion and effective methodology have earned her respect and admiration from clients, students, and fellow trainers alike. So please welcome Bobbie Lyons to the show.
Yes, I'd like to welcome the myth, the legend, trainer extraordinaire, Bobbie Lyons.
Thank you both. What a wonderful intro. I am a Karen Pryor faculty member as well, so I mentor young and experienced trainers through the Karen Pryor program as well.
How did you first discover this idea of just turning simple movement into exercise for fitness purposes?
I guess the best way to start would be, I had a dog that I was doing agility with. He was a Border Collie Aussie Cross that I rescued, and he was a very tense dog, and he had a lot of discomfort in his back because of that tenseness. And also he wasn't really using his body effectively. He was dropping bars in agility, which often indicates that the dog is not lifting the front of their body up as well as they could and not using their rear end. So I went down a couple of different paths. I thought maybe massage would help him, but I have arthritis in my thumbs, so I didn't think massage was the right avenue for me to go down. And so I started looking at other options that would really, truly help him. And what I kind of realized is that so many dogs out there don't know where their rear end is. They don't know how to effectively use their rear. And that's why we end up with a lot of knee injuries, a lot of hip injuries, a lot of soft tissue injuries around I'll say mid-back to down the back legs, because they're just sort of flying behind the dog like a kite. So I kind of worked through a lot of different things and really watching the dogs so that I could really see which movements and where the dog's head position needed to be to effectively get them to understand how to use their body. and how to engage their rear end in their forward movement. And of course, side to side in all the different directions. But really, fitness has a lot to do with observation. So like Chris, the exercises I might choose for a dog that you bring me versus a dog that somebody else brings me, even though you might have similar breeds, the exercises that we choose sometimes can be different based on what the dog is telling us.
Two German Shepherds with the same problem, I might go with two different plans based on what was going on with the dog.
Right. Or based on things that the dog does repetitively. Like say, I pick on Malinois a lot because they circle. And oftentimes the circling ends up being the same, like over muscling situation that they also have because they walk on the same side of the handler all the time. For instance, if you're walking your dog, one of the best things that you can do for your dog is walk them on both sides of your body. So, walk the first 15 minutes with the dog on one side and the second 15 minutes with the dog on the other side, or, switch them back and forth. And you can also teach them how to do that on cue, which just, improves that bond between you because you're developing a language, I guess is the best way to look at it, rather than just kind of, pulling your dog around. If you can develop that language between you, then there's a lot more understanding of what is being asked.
I have told so many of friends, family, let alone clients' dogs, to walk their dogs not just on the left side. You've got to switch it up because as a PT, we're all about symmetry and we're not symmetrical beings to start with. There's always a dominance to start with. So if you continue to feed into that over and over and over again, you're just setting yourself up for problems or setting your dog up for problems long term.
Absolutely. It makes the side that is closest to the handler weaker. So the biggest problem with that, and people don't really think about this, but like say you have a pet dog and your dog gets a lot of its exercise by retrieving a ball or a frisbee or something like that. When that dog lands, if the ground is too soft or too wet, or they're turning in a sharp way, if they are turning and they want to use that weaker side for stability, that's when it breaks because it's not strong enough to handle those movements.
Can you go over the benefits of incorporating this kind of canine fitness exercise program into a pet dog's routine?
Yes. And I'll touch on, some of them. There's just a huge multitude of benefits, but ones that I like to touch on the most is that it builds confidence in dogs that are not sure about the environment, not sure about their own movement. The stage where they look like they have boots on.
Yes.
Yes. And you make them more confident about those big feet or whatever. And all of a sudden they are, more in tune with the handler because you're working together. They are more confident walking on leash. They're paying more attention to the leash and less about their feet, if that makes sense, paying more attention to the handler and less about their body. It helps them, even when they're in groups of dogs. I've seen dogs that lack confidence and then through doing some movements and some surface training, so getting their feet on different surfaces and kind of teaching them to move their bodies in all directions, not just in a forward motion, for instance, does help them in a group situation. So I've had dogs that, do dog daycare or they live in a house full of dogs where just doing some simple fitness exercises makes a huge difference in their quality of life with all of the rest of those dogs.
I've actually had people say, well, why should I be concerned about my dog's confidence? And I think you should be concerned about your dog's confidence because I think it's a quality of life issue. I want my dog to be able to participate in whatever, we're actively doing, walks or classes or going to his nose work class. I don't want dogs to isolate themselves because they're not confident.
Exactly. And then the other thing that I would say is just really a lot of people think that taking their dog for a hike is enough. And actually the strength exercises helps with hiking because it teaches them how to place their feet more appropriately so that they don't, get stuck in a hole or, trip over things. And it really helps with prehab. Like I use the word prehab a lot because rehab is after injury. Prehab is trying to keep your dog from getting injured. And just having the strength and the confidence to do their daily activities or even their weekend warrior activities really does help them not injure themselves. A good example, I guess, in the human world would be if you are learning a new skill and you're thinking about all the things. I'll take my KPA students as an example. I'm like, okay, so your hand has to return to home. Don't have your hand in your treat bag. Don't click until the desired behavior is done. And which hand is the clicker in? And they're all fumbling over all of these things. And if you think about that in terms of dogs, they say they are, a tall, lanky dog who really hasn't learned how to use his body. He's thinking about forward motion. He's thinking about where his feet go. He's thinking about the pressure on the leash. He might be thinking about the handler, but the handler is generally going to be last because he's also scanning the environment to see if there's anything he needs to be concerned about. And if you make them more confident in who they are, where they need to be in space next to you, and how to move, then it takes some of those distractions away from just general loose leash walking.
If you could practice the right things so they can pay attention to the things that are important in their environment, because maybe you've taken away that need to really focus on where I place my foot because it's coming more naturally with these exercises and things. Am I hitting on that?
Absolutely. Because I think that people don't really, a lot of people think that a dog is a dog, and they don't think about all the things that the dog has to pay attention to or feels the need to pay attention to when they're out there. I mean, we're talking about, what can they see? What can they hear? What can they smell? Those are all aside from I'm on a leash, I'm walking somewhere, I'm, how do I place my feet? All of those things. So if you can take some of those check boxes out, so the dog doesn't need to pay attention to his feet anymore. He knows where he's supposed to be next to the handler, and he knows if he is walking on a different surface, he's already experienced those surfaces before, or he knows how to adjust, then those things aren't scary or worrisome. And then the other things in the environment are not as scary or worrisome either because there's less things to be concerned about.
I think as a physical therapist, I get this a lot where I hear, physical therapy, it's all exercise and it's all about strength building and, no pain, no gain and all of that. Are there misconceptions to, lay people and dog owners about canine fitness in that capacity where they may just think it's all about like building strength and not appreciating all these nuanced things that you've just described?
Yes. I think that fitness is kind of a taboo word for a lot of people out there. I try to stay away from that particular word just because we're not trying to build bodybuilders. And I think that that's one of the things that people, like say they have a bully breed, they have a pity or a staffy, any of those, they're genetically gifted. And the answer really is if you put those dogs on something that requires balance, they fall off because they're used to using large muscle groups and momentum to keep themselves in balance versus actively engaging the supporting muscles and their core muscles to stay balanced. So one of the things that we do is we put the dogs through a lot of different motions so that the body understands how to do those things, but it's not exactly building like big, giant bodybuilding muscles. We're trying to keep the entire body healthy and getting the dog to activate more muscles in their movement. So if they're using momentum, those big muscles are going to engage and be happy and do their thing. But if that dog is on a surface that requires balance and they have to call on those smaller muscles to engage to help stay balanced, that's when they break. They're just not strong enough or they're dormant. They're not doing anything. So if we never expose them to those things, then it's really putting them at risk for injury.
I wanted to just comment on this misconception about canine fitness because I hear this all the time too from people who have, smaller breed dogs, that they don't need fitness, that they don't need to have, all these things, awareness of their body and training and so forth. But I think that could be a misconception. I mean, I certainly am cautious because I have a brachiocephalic breed. I'm always cautious in knowing that he can only do so much in certain weather conditions and so forth. But my dog is an athlete, and that's, he performs feats of athleticism every day. And he also has a grade 1 luxating patella, so I want to make sure that he stays strong. So I think there's also a misconception that canine fitness is about big dogs or sporting dogs, but I think it's for everyone. Sure, there might be limitations based on your breed or based on what medical condition maybe your dog has, but it really is for everybody.
Papillons and Shih Tzus as clients, all the way up to Newfoundlands and Burmese mountain dogs and Great Danes. So it really is for everybody, and the bonding experience that people can have doing all of the fitness exercises and teaching targeting and teaching all of the things, is great for every dog and every handler. And just to touch on what you said about the luxating patella in your own dog, like Papillons, for instance, a lot of smaller dogs have grade 1 or 2 luxating patellas. And, my goal always is to help these dogs not have to have surgery because they are strong above and below that joint. And, I have dogs that have low grade hip dysplasia, for instance, and we're able to keep those dogs from having to have surgery by just keeping him strong, but doing rotating exercises on a regular basis. And I think the other thing that people think is that it takes a long time, and it doesn't have to. If you get with a coach that can give you a kind of rotating plan, you can get this done 3 times a week, in 15 minutes or so. And that's, aside from your walks or whatever else you're doing.
Bobbie, when you were talking about, just strength building and, trying to dispel this whole misconception around fitness, I worked at the University of Colorado as a PT, and we had so many injuries because it's an active student population, and they would go to the gym and they would lift weights, but then they're out there trail running and playing, ultimate frisbee and this kind of thing. And they'd have rotator cuff injuries, back pain, ACL tears, ankle sprains, because one component that I really emphasize as their physical therapist was proprioception. So I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. And proprioception, for those of you that don't know, is the awareness, as we were discussing, of where your body is in space, your limbs relative to each other and their environment. So as or more important in my mind than strengthening is developing that balance of proprioception, which you've alluded to.
I really think that the proprioception piece is really the key element to fitness. There's a program out there called Functional Patterns, but it's basically about taking you back down to kind of, how did you learn how to walk? Very much, I think what we are doing with dogs with fitness is we're basically saying, okay, so how do we stand? How do we sit? And then how do we turn that stand and that sit, once it is correct, into exercise? We don't want to necessarily, like, say you take that dog that has the sloppy sit because they're on slippery floors all the time. I don't want to do, sit stands or anything like that with the dog in the sloppy sit, because that's going to put too much pressure on the knees and the hips, right? So very much fitness is about teaching the dog what is correct and what isn't, and then, building from there, or exposing them to different movements. Like pet dogs, often the only time that they go in all directions is when they're chasing a ball or chasing, their housemate, another dog. But in fitness, we can teach them to strengthen those muscles so that they don't get broken when they're playing with dogs or retrieving a ball. Or so really concentrating on that proprioception in all directions, which could be simple as like doing an S motion on and off a curb. If you are walking on a street that doesn't have a lot of cars, you can go, up and down off of a curb. You can stop and ask your dog to sit with their front feet up on the curb. Obviously, that S motion needs to be done in both directions, but I think my neighbors in particular think I'm nuts because I have my dogs turn circles when they're on leash, and we back up and we go forward and we go sideways.
They're like, there she is again.
But I have so many clients that are concerned about that. And I'm like, who cares? You're taking care of your dog. And once they know what this is about, they're going to be like, yes, there she is, taking care of her dog.
So, Bobbie, how do you assess a dog's fitness level and tailor that exercise accordingly?
It's a little tricky, and there's been a lot of different schools of thought out there. But at the end of the day, it's not the same as human fitness, and it's really about observation. So for me, I really look at the postures, as you know.
Yeah.
We start exactly with the stand, sitting down. Are the feet and knees where they're supposed to be? Are the front feet, elbows where they're supposed to be? What is the dog actually doing? And then we kind of build from there. So if I also look at the transitions between all of those. So is the dog staying tucked under? For instance, I have mini Aussies and our mini American Shepherds. Australian Shepherds and mini American Shepherds are very notorious for not kicking their rear feet back all the way to a natural stand, which over time and repetition puts a lot of pressure on the low back and pelvis. So it is really, really important to get them to move all the way to a normal stand, and just educating the owners on what does that look like. I've been observing dogs for a really long time. And that's the one thing that I can say is you really you have to be able to watch what they're doing and how they're doing it, and kind of build from there.
Well, and I think that people may be able to observe on a very cursory level, again, as owners, but then they don't know why and they don't know what to do about it. So that's the next step. They're like, my dog is, tripping on the stairs, or my dog is side sitting, or, my dog is struggling to get up from a lying position. So they know the result of maybe an injury starting to happen, or, some congenital issue, or aging processes, or what have you, but they don't know now what, now what do I do about it? And so, to your point, both of you, I think that, seeking out some professional advice. And that kind of brings me to my next question, Bobbie, is, you have this course about simple movements and turning them into exercises. Why is this a good course for a layperson to take? Why is this a good starting point?
I think it's a good starting point because oftentimes the dogs already know the movements and you're just refining the movements that they're doing. And so, for instance, most dogs have a sit. If they are doing a rock back sit, for instance, that turns into a squat the more elevated the front feet are. So what you want to pay attention to, though, is not asking your dog to do a whole bunch of them, because again, we're not trying to build bodybuilders. We're trying to build lean muscle that is flexible and can do all of the movements. Mm-hmm. So, but you can elevate the front feet a little bit over time up to, say, chest height. And then the more we elevate the front feet, the more weight is shifted to the rear. And we are, doing sit stands. So the same thing can be true for down stands. You can elevate the front to work the rear. You can elevate the rear to work the front legs. Another motion that is in that class is pivoting. So just a simple front feet kind of stationary, rear feet are moving around in a circle. And you can add things like stepping over something so that the dog is flexing the limb while they're abducting or reaching out. Most dogs that pivot drag their feet. So adding something to step over or step onto is really important, depending on what your goal is.
So you're taking some basic foundational movements and then reframing that for the pet owner so that they appreciate that it's an exercise, what is being developed, what the goal is there. And, to your point of repetition, really focusing on quality versus quantity. You only want to practice correct movements.
Correct.
I have this little Keyshawn that I love, and I taught him just recently how to pivot. I can't tell you how happy he was when he realized that he was doing something correctly. He just lit up, and you could just see it in his eyes. He's like, oh my God, I just learned something. This is amazing. And then every time I see him after that, he's like, we're going to do the thing, right? We're going to do the thing. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to do the thing. But I mean, honestly, it kind of enhanced our relationship too, as his rehabber and during his recovery, that he was so engaged with learning something and then so happy with himself when he learned it. It felt good.
People really don't understand the importance of teaching your dog different things. We'll take my puppy as an example. He's a year old. If he is bored, he will bark at random things. He will find things to chew on. He will sometimes lift his leg because he's an intact male.
Naughty boy.
It's a bummer. Yeah, that's a bummer.
Because he's naughty. But they will chew things up. And this is all due to boredom. In most cases, it is 100% due to boredom. So if you can spend, just a small amount of time, like I'll use again myself as an example. I spent, 20 minutes teaching something new to all 4 of my dogs, not 20 minutes each. I spent 20 minutes collectively with them, and they were learning how to wait their turn. They were learning, also whatever I was teaching them. So their brains were engaged that whole 20 minutes, even if they were not the dog that was working.
People underestimate the mental expenditure that happens in that short time frame. And so I could work a dog for an hour on the treadmill and the pool and whatever, and they could still have, a lot of energy, but I could take 5 minutes and teach them something new. And they're like, whoa, I'm tired. But it's good. And it's really good for their, the more we do that, their cerebral capacity is going to increase.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people think if I take my dog for a 20-minute walk, they're tired when they come back, but they're not physically tired. They're mentally tired because of all the smells and what they saw on that walk and managing the environment. And that 20 minutes is not physically demanding. It's more mentally demanding for them as well.
Bobbie, can you describe some specific success stories where you've seen dogs significantly improve in their overall health and well-being through your training programs?
Okay, so I'll start with, I had a pet dog that was, and that might feel like it's not fitness related, but just going back to what we talked about before, who was being carried everywhere and didn't have any muscle. He was a little dog that was always carried. He would bark at people. He was generally afraid of the environment because he really just had not been allowed to explore it. So the very first exercise that I gave these people to do was to put their dog on the ground and learn to walk it on leash. So literally loose leash walking was the first thing that we worked on. Then we worked on loose leash walking on different surfaces. I had them go to playgrounds and things like that where the ground might be different underneath the equipment, like it might be bark chips or it might be sand or it might be, around here up by the zoo, they have, kind of a rubber surface. It might be grass, it might be dirt, whatever the case may be. But I had them do the loose leash walking on all of those different surfaces. And of course, when they were with me, we did obstacle courses with the inflatable equipment and the stable equipment so that the dog can learn to balance and figure out where his feet were. That's kind of where we started with this dog. And after, I want to say the first 3 months, we worked into doing exercises similar to what I've already mentioned, like putting front feet on a curb and doing sit stands or going on and off a curb, or with this dog walking on, like going to the school where they have those parking things where you park and there's like a little barrier.
Like a little curb, yeah.
And so one of the things that we did with this dog was she would get a line of those about 10 parking spaces long, and the dog would walk on like a balance beam, walk on it, and then off, and then on to the next one, and then off, and then on to the next one. And so again, teaching the dog where to place his feet and how to stay balanced so that they're engaging the smaller muscle groups was really it was huge for this dog. And this dog went from borderline super reactive to owning the world. Literally, he walked in, when I met this dog, it was in a pet store where they carried him in. And this dog went from being afraid of all of the things to walking in, head high, chest out, like, I got this. It was amazing. And they were just so pleased because they had an actual dog and not just a fearful animal that they had to manage all the time. And it was so great to see this dog be okay with things in the environment and okay, seeing new things. Like I took them to, places like Dick's Sporting Goods where, the doors don't swing, they slide, and he walks right in there. And it was great. And part of that was building strength because the dog had no muscle because it was being carried everywhere. And also just building that confidence of, like I said, how to move and where to move and how to not be stepped on by his owners and how to not be stepped on by other people. Navigating that world from such a small framed dog can be scary, but they don't learn it unless they're on the ground.
You're using everyday environment to teach this dog. I think that's one of the misconceptions too, is that, when you're training, you need all this specialized equipment and it's such a, financial investment, time investment. And I try to tell all my, not only that anything can be turned into an exercise in terms of the particular activity, but what you use can be used as an exercise. So, tree roots, in the woods and walking over those. And like you said, on and off the curb and going around the fire hydrant and all the different surfaces. I mean, that's just brilliant. And it's all exercise. It all counts. It all makes a significant difference. You're taking, the dog out of its bubble, if you will. And I was thinking too, when you were describing this little dog, I don't know how old it was, but that sounds like what the breeders do with a lot of the little puppies, right? In terms of exposing them to different things to learn about their bodies. So, having little wobble boards and squishy surfaces and, a playpen with balls and all of that for the little puppies to learn, about their environment and that things aren't scary and they don't have to, react in a negative way to that. So awesome.
This dog was living in a fishbowl being carried around. I think you just imagine his whole world is opened up. He's had a life transformation really with that happening. And I'm always interested in the emotional well-being of animals and their emotional states. And it must have just felt really good for this dog emotionally to be able to go into Dick's Sporting Goods and go, I'm going to go through these sliding glass doors. No problem.
Right. And this dog was 3. So he had 3 years of his life being carried around, and through exercise and through putting him down on the ground and walking him and, incorporating both, he went from a dog that lived in a fishbowl, I like that word, to a dog that kind of broke the fishbowl and like, I got this. And it was amazing to see. And it was amazing to even see the handlers or, the owners, because they probably bought this dog to be a purse dog. I kind of came in and said, this reactivity that you're getting is not going to go away unless you let this dog be a dog. Another thing that, say, a lot of pet owners teach their dog to give a paw, and they don't really realize that giving a paw in a sit or a stand or even a down is a really good weight shifting exercise.
But they only teach them one paw so many times. So going back to that whole symmetry thing, you got to have them give paw with both front limbs.
Yep.
And then I'm thinking about our seniors too, because so many of the activities that you mentioned can be applied to the senior dogs that maybe, due to whatever life circumstances or injury and just, osteoarthritis, that sort of thing, their activity level may have waned. They're not going out as much, et cetera. And it's never too late to start some of these just activities, right? Just enriching activities. We don't have to think of them as fitness exercises, are so great, for all age levels, including the very geriatric.
We interviewed one of Bobbie's colleagues back in July of 2022, Lisa Schmidt. We did a whole show on fitness for seniors. So if you haven't listened to that show and you have a senior dog, you may want to go and listen to that episode as well.
But speaking of this, how do you ensure the safety of the dogs, Bobbie? What are things that you look for to make sure that, we're not pushing them too much and so forth.
One of the things that I kind of tell people a lot is that fitness doesn't have to be extreme. It can be very typical movements that are just made harder by shifting more weight to that area of the body. So if you're thinking in terms of simple versus extreme, a good example of this is, when I teach the fitness program, oftentimes I will tell them, shout out an exercise and I'll demonstrate it with Drama. Drama's my border collie. Drama's a pretty capable dog. He's been doing fitness his whole life. Obviously, all my dogs do. And so they can pretty much throw anything at me and I will, do whatever they say. And one of them at one time said, can Drama sit pretty on top of 2 donuts stacked? And I was like, well, I could hold the donuts and ask him to get up there and sit pretty. But what is the point of that?
The risk is not worth the reward, it seems.
Right. Well, and that's what I was trying to explain to them, is that this isn't about how extreme you can get or how fancy you can get. It's about making sure that the dog is strong in his normal movements. And so I would say sit pretty on 2 donuts is not something that is a normal movement, and also not something that needs to be done. He can sit pretty on a balance disc and be close to the floor, and the risk is a lot less.
But dogs that are young, or maybe their growth plates haven't closed yet, what do you recommend for some of those dogs that are in that young category?
I like to expose them to all the things. So all the surfaces, just no repetition. So the big thing with young dogs is anything that would be considered repetitive, I would stay away from. So anything more than, say, 3 reps, I would definitely do a lot more like obstacle course types of things where they can maybe stop and do 1 down or 1 sit while they're on different surfaces. But I wouldn't be asking for like a fitness program, like 5 exercises and sets and reps and all of that stuff. They really can be exposed to all the movements. For instance, with my own puppies, I do teach them, pivot and sidestepping and all of that stuff, probably by the time that they're 6 months old, but not to full understanding. I expose them to those movements and then I build on those movements later. So I'm just asking them, can you move to the side? Can you move to the side from both directions? Okay, great. We'll revisit that later. And I do a lot of clicker training. So I am setting the dog up to offer the movement. And so they can kind of tell me when they can't do it and when they can.
An analogy I think that a lot of people can relate to is kind of going through school, right? So like your young puppies start kindergarten, everything's happy and fun. And like you said, just the exposure. And then, you progress through, grade school and middle school and high school. And then when you get, your performance dogs, then they're in college, and some of them go on to get their PhD, and they're competing for world championships and things like that. And, we got so excited about the little Yorkie mix that you were talking about as a pet dog. Did you want to circle back and share a success story with an athletic dog?
So I have a dog that is a flyball dog. He had a TPLO surgery. So he had knee surgery because he tore a ligament. And he went through rehab. And when he was done with rehab, he was referred to me. Still did not have full range of motion in his knee or anything like that. And there are definitely different exercises that I do that are not really known. Like they're just things that I've developed over time to get the dog to engage the right muscles. So I met with her once a week via Zoom. And that was just because she really wanted to make sure she was doing the exercises right, because her goal was to go back to flyball. And in order to go back to flyball, we really need normal movement in that leg so that it's not putting a lot of pressure on the other leg. So we did a lot of fitness exercises. They were told to do a lot of walking up hills. They were told to do recalls up hills. We did a lot of other very, very specific exercises. And that dog went back to flyball and broke its own speed record.
Whoa.
Hey,
That's amazing. That's awesome.
But, a lot of people, they don't want to go through rehab and then spend another, 3 to 6 months paying for fitness training. But at the end of the day, rehab is designed to get you back to, normal activity. It's not really designed to take you back to a performance level.
right. Yeah, that'd be like a professional athlete on the human side. They have all that support of, in that case, a lot of money invested,
Right.
in them returning to their sport oftentimes. And, but this all falls on the pet owner. So that's dedication.
Well, and I think the big thing is just really realizing that there's people out there like me that can help with that. And there's so many dogs early on in my career that like never made it back to sport after, say, like a psoas injury. And it's one of those things looking back, like, if I knew then what I know now, we always say that, right? Canine fitness really wasn't a thing when I started. Like the first class I ever taught, I didn't even know if the dogs would interact with the balance equipment. It was human balance equipment. It wasn't, wasn't made for dogs. I had no idea what was going to happen. The more you learn, the more you realize that the exercises don't have to be a dog standing on a round ball, for instance, but a round ball is going to, arch their back. And so standing on them for a long period of time is really not beneficial.
That's one of the challenges that I have is convincing pet owners that what I am asking them to do with their pet, it is actually beneficial and exercise. They think it has to look and be extraordinary. And I have difficulties with that sometimes and convincing them. So oftentimes as a matter of incentive, I will say, okay, buy this piece of equipment, because you can do all of these different things with it. Do you have a go-to, like if somebody, really thinks that they need to have a special piece of equipment in order to be motivated, in order to get the benefit of the services they're paying for example, that you recommend?
Cato board or Cato plank.
Can you explain to the audience what that is?
I don't even think I know what those are.
It's just a platform.
There's so many things you can do with the platform.
Yeah, it's a platform with a non-slip surface. So it's Cato CATO. They have a Cato plank that comes with a tilt stand if you order it that way, so it can be a teeter. And then they have a Cato board that's a little bit wider and shorter than the plank. You can do a lot with a platform or two platforms. I would say that I do use the balance equipment quite a lot, but that's not where I start people. I start them on stable surfaces because I want the posture to be right before I add them to balance equipment. Because if I'm adding them to balance equipment in the wrong posture, then I'm not encouraging the correct muscle use.
Bobbie, when you say balance equipment, are you referring to inflatable equipment?
Yes. So like, for instance, on the teeter, on the Cato with the tilt stand, I can have the dog stand over the center, the tipping point, and stay standing and rock the teeter back and forth. It has 3 different levels of drop. So if they can do that, then they can probably have their front feet or their rear feet off the ground on balance equipment. And so it's really about not, I guess the fight or flight concept might make sense to everybody. Yeah. If the muscles are in flight mode, they generally going to break, or they're going to turn off and defer to a different muscle group. And so if you are slowing down and really getting the dog to understand how to move, then the muscles are going to engage and hold that movement so that they can stay balanced. Where if you put the dog on, say, dog's never been on balance equipment before, you immediately will find that they throw their weight forward and they're not using their rear because they don't know how to do that. And they're now putting more stress on their wrists and on their shoulders to try to take the weight off of their rear legs. And then they're not engaging their abdominal muscles or their hip stabilizers at all because there's literally no weight in their back legs. So if you put them on balance equipment too quickly, then you're not engaging what you think you are.
we say this all the time, that what we find as dogs age is that dogs seem to lose their strength in their hind end first. Rarely do I see a dog that's lost strength in the front end first. And so I think for long-term benefits for these dogs, even this having the awareness of their hind end and the strengthening of their hind end appropriately is going to benefit them as they age into their senior years.
Absolutely. I think that, well, what a lot of people may not know is that the dog carries 60% of their weight forward and 40% in the rears. So I always use the analogy, like when you are on ice, what do you do to stay balanced?
Take little
short, choppy steps.
Yep.
Yeah.
Short, choppy steps, or you might
swing my arms.
Yep. Swing your arms.
Hold my arms out for balance and hunch over.
And possibly get wide.
Oh, yeah. More stable base of support. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you think about that in terms of a dog, they can't flail their arms side to side if they're off balance.
They can't catch themselves.
They can't catch themselves that way. They have to learn to catch themselves with their stabilizing muscles around the hips and the shoulders and throwing their weight side to side, maybe with head movement, maybe with a foot movement, but they have to learn how to balance by shifting their body weight versus putting their arms up like we can.
And then I fall. Chris, if I fall, though, I'm going to bring out that Medco Luma.
There you go. Decrease that inflammation right away. So if that's true, and we need to get them to engage their core stabilizers around their pelvis and shoulder girdles, then why don't we just place dogs on slippery surfaces to force that issue?
Because when you do, they just shift their weight forward and widen their front legs and stop using their rear. So I would say
that's the way they compensate.
Yes. The vast majority of dogs everywhere in the world today that are living on hardwood floors or laminate floors or slippery floors of any kind are already doing that.
I was thinking that in my head too, because I was thinking this is exactly how Dr. Busby describes these dogs who are slipping on there and splaying and getting injured from slipping and splaying on floors because they can't gain traction.
And when you're talking about the ice, if I was, a figure skater or a speed skater or something like that, I'm going to be very comfortable on ice and I'm going to be jacked. I'm going to have every muscle, including my core stabilizers, very well developed. So how that person operates on ice and how I would walk across a short expanse of ice looks very different. So back to your point, Bobbie, of, doing all the preparatory work to get to that really high level. I mean, there's years and years of training that, may go into this. And so we inadvertently, even though we have good intentions, we inadvertently create bad habits, compensations, and so forth. And so, I guess if there's one message that I want our audience to hear, it's like that you can do so much with very little, and that foundation is so important, and just making sure that form and the quality of movement is there before you take that next step.
Right. And when you think about that too, I think it's also important to realize that if a pet dog person comes to me for fitness, I'm not going to send them home with 5 things to train. I'm going to take that dog where they are today. What movement does the dog already know that I can use as a fitness exercise? And what movement can I easily lure and show the owners how to lure to get the desired exercise? I get a lot of people that don't realize that there are lots of things that we can get the dogs to do that will improve their fitness level without doing a lot of training. And there's a lot of, yes, I'm going to throw out there, I am a KPA faculty member. I am a dog trainer at heart. I nerd out on dog training, but not every person who has a dog wants to be a dog trainer. And you have to understand what their goals are and what they're willing to do as well, so that you can kind of marry those two things together and benefit the dog. My goal always is to marry the plan that the dog needs with the owner's capabilities, not going over the owner's capabilities, because if you do that, then they're not going to do the exercises with the dog and they're not going to have any fun doing it.
Yeah,
because there's not going to be any change. there's not going to be any effective change, And that's why they're hired.
There's some owners where I can give them, say 3 to 5 exercises to complete with their dog 3 days a week, and they're fine. I have some people that can only handle 3. So I might make those 3 exercises a little bit of a combination. So I'm getting 2 movements in 1 exercise, so I can maximize the time that the owner is spending. My goal is for them not to be spending an hour every day doing exercises. And I don't subscribe to every day because the body needs time to mentally and physically recover. So doing the exercises every day is generally not what I recommend. I always say 3 to 5 days a week. I would say most of my clients do 3 to 4, depending on their life and what's going on that week. And I, generally don't beat my clients with a noodle if they don't. We just start where we left off. And sometimes they need that appointment to come back to kind of jumpstart again, because maybe they were on vacation and they forgot what they were doing or whatever. But at the end of the day, any fitness is better than none, just like with us.
That's what I always say too.
Absolutely.
I really, really like to help dogs go back to performance or to perform better. Or if it's a pet dog, I want them to not get injured when they chase the ball, to not get injured when they're out hiking. It's an amazing gift that I can give them as far as just knowing how to set their dog up for success.
Bobbie, as we're wrapping up, can you let our listeners know where can they find you? Where can they find your online courses? Or if they have any questions, how can they reach out to you?
They can definitely reach out via positive-performance.com. I do spell positive PAWSITIVE. They can reach out via Bobbie Lyons Canine Campus.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that people from everywhere, as Kathy mentioned in the very beginning, Bobbie touches lives around the globe. So, you can get, virtual consults and help anywhere you are. And as always, we will put the contact information of where to find Bobbie Lyons in the show notes. Thank you, Bobbie. Thank you for lending us your expertise and all of your valuable time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our show.
Follow us on social media at PetAbility Podcast.
And please check out our affiliates and sponsors.
Simply go to the show notes for information and links.
Thank you, and tune in next time.